They're really banking on the pre-board configuration.
Yeah.
Um,
The question is, do you even want the Abrades? Like the only thing that they're going to be hitting out of the Eldrazi deck post board is potentially the two copies of Grim Monolith, right?
yeah, you could tag some mimics as well. The problem is you need to get these four Chalice of the Voids out of your deck, right? And
Yeah.
perhaps even the two copies of Trinisphere. So you're gonna be scrapping to get anything relevant in there, and I think a Braid probably would be the first card to come in. Definitely some picking the worst of two evils if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. How do you feel about Ensnaring Bridge in this matchup? Do you think like because of the existence of Ulamog, is that and Ratchet Bomb, is that a reasonable plan, game one or post sideboard?
I think you need to. Oh, that's another reason to bring in a Braid, right? The Racket Bombs.
Yeah.
But I think you do need an Ensnaring Bridge. I think you need to bank on setting up like an Ensnaring Bridge Blood Moon lock where they can't activate their Ivugan to get Ulamog and perhaps just hope they don't draw their one copy. But like you said, they're going to need a threat as well because giving the Eldrazi deck too much time, they're going to draw into their answers, which they're going to be pretty flush of post board.
Yeah, and it looks like the action just started, and it looks like the Moon Stompy player is on the play. I think I also saw a City of Traders and a Blood Moon in his hand, so this
Right.
could be a pretty quick game one here.
And it looks like you're right. The
Yeah.
Eldrazi deck had Chalice of the Void, not very effective on the draw.
Yeah.
Haruya
Now,
probably would have played his Chrome Boxes.
worth noting, we have a copy of Wastes and Grim Monolith in his hand, so Turi is still going to have access to colorless mana in two different ways this game. So it's
Yeah, well,
not totally lights out yet.
in fact, this Blood Moon is pretty ineffective in general. It's going to stop Mana Reshaper from coming down this turn, but after this turn, he's going to have basically access to cast almost every spell in his deck. He won't be able to. Oh, it looks like he's opting to play the Mana Reshaper, which makes sense. He doesn't have any other threats in his hand, so he'll have time to untap this Grim Monolith later.
Yeah, I think that's the correct line here. Now the question is, does Hiroyuki have a follow up?
A lot of his follow-ups are pretty weak. Both Rabble Master and Legion War Boss aren't that good in the face of a Matter Reshaper because the tokens have to attack. That's part of the upside of Legion War Boss is that you only have to attack with the one token you make on that turn. But when you don't already have a bunch of tokens in play, it ends up being pretty similar. So Haruya is going to have to find something good, especially considering he has to use a Spirit Guide here to play a 3-mana spell, which is not what he wants to do.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate because one of the other cards in his hand is Fiery Confluence, and I think Fiery Confluence destroying Grim Monolith and potentially it almost doesn't. It's not that it doesn't matter what the other two modes are, but that would be a pretty strong card. Now it looks like he's not going to be able to play that for a couple turns here. He's consigning himself to not playing that for at least 2 more turns, which means that Turi is going to have the opportunity to untap the Grim Monolith, potentially play something big.
Right, and he actually drew his one copy of Ulamog, which might, with this non-threatening draw from Hiroyuki, he might have enough time to set that up. And he opted not to play his Rabble Master, which makes sense because I think the text means he would have had to attack with his Legion War Boss, and he definitely doesn't want to do that. But yeah, Taruya is sandbagging his copy of Basic Waste, perhaps to entice the Fiery Cannonade or Fiery Confluence rather, to kill the Grim Monolith, even though it wouldn't be that devastating. But we might be seeing Ulamog in as few as 3 turns from now. Do you think as Taruya he should just cast his Ulamog and try to kill Hiroyuki as quickly as possible, or save it for a potential Ensnaring Bridge, considering it is his only out?
Well, I think it's pretty contextual given what the game state is. So you can pretty easily imagine, casting Ulamog when Hiroyuki has 3 lands in play and has missed quite a few land drops in a row, taking out 2 lands and then just attacking with it for a few turns.
Right.
Keeping him off the mana sources to allow him to cast Ensnaring Bridge. But if there's a very different game state, I could imagine just holding on to it. Like it just like an NS1 for 8 is going to do a really effective job at attacking Hiroyuki. He's just not going to be able to block it effectively. I think he has a redundant copy of Magus of the Moon in his hand, so he'll have a couple of turns to chump. But once there's a threat like that on board, save the Ensnaring Bridge, Hiroyuki's deck is just not built to deal with something like that.
Yeah, and Taru is really getting paid off for the small differences in his deck construction that he decided to make, like this copy of Basic Waste and this Grim Monolith. He didn't necessarily need both of them this game, but drawing, just increasing the density of those cards, and just swung this game one from unwinnable to basically unlosable.
Yeah. Taruya now has 6 mana available, so we might see a card like Oblivion Sower come in, or it might just be something as simple as untapping Grand Monolith and setting up for Ulamog.
Yep, Ulamog's going to be coming down on the following turn. That's why he decided to pump the extra 3 mana into this Endbringer, knowing that he could untap it this turn and then Ulamog the following turn anyway, so it wasn't going to slow that down at all.
Okay. The 4th mana source for Hiroyuki is pretty good here. He has Fiery Confluence and Chandra in play. So, he's got effectively like 6 or I think 5 different spells that he can play in his hand with the Confluence's different modes as well as the Chandra. So he's going to have some options here.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you mentioned before. It becomes a lot more sketchy for Taruya to just play an Ulamog here and go after Hiroyuki's land, because if Hiroyuki just follows that up with a land and an ensnaring bridge after that, then he's just going to be locked out of the game, and he doesn't want that to happen.
Yeah, definitely. And it looks like he's opting to destroy the Grim Monolith here to keep him off the potential Ulamog, and I guess just colorless mana in general, even though he does have the wastes in play. So now that we've reached this point in the game, I think Taruya is probably favored, and the reason for that is I think the spells that he has the opportunity to draw in his deck are just so much better than Hiroyuki. Like, additional copies of Blood Moon don't do anything. Magus of the Moon is literally just a 3-mana 2/2 at this point, and Taruya has Thought-Knot Seers, Reality Smashers, Oblivion Sowers, a bunch of other huge monsters that I think are just going to run right over this board.
Wow, that's actually huge.
Yeah, I was gonna void for 4.
I was gonna say that Taruya's life total was actually fairly low, and he could have just died to some more burn. The Confluence last turn ended up doing 4 damage to the dome, I believe. But this Callous on 4 is actually gonna be a huge game changer. It's gonna lock out the Chandra that he has in hand and the potential for other cards. Oh, and is that the Ensnaring Bridge?
Yeah, that looks like a
little bit of there.
And I think just a few turns here, we're going to see an Eldrazi cast taking out that Ensnaring Bridge.
That being said, Taruya's a 4, right? So is he just dead here?
Yes, I believe he is dead on board.
He get too aggressive? I don't think there's anything he could have. There's no main deck copies of Spatial Contortion. Wow,
that was...
Hiroyuki with a very, very timely Ensnaring Bridge. Perhaps Taruya got a little bit too aggressive having that Ulamog in hand. Maybe you could have sat back a little bit, but I understand wanting to attack and try to close the game out so that he doesn't get burned out in any way, but maybe a little bit too aggressive.
Yeah, I think that single attack with the Endless One may have been what lost him the game there. And what's interesting is that Taruya knew he had inevitability with that game just because the existence of Ulamog. Even after the Grim Monolith had been destroyed, I think he already had I think it was 7 lands in play. It might have been 6, but if you're able to lock the board down at that point and make sure that you're not getting attacked by these small 1/1s and 2/2s, these sorts of things, that Ulamog's going to come down and just and totally take over the game. So maybe a slight misstep from Taruya there that cost him a game in the finals.
So after board, both decks are going to get a lot more lean, get their chalices out, he's probably going to get Thorn of Amethyst out of the deck as well. Yeah.
I mean, I think Thorn is probably not a card that you're going to want to play, but it does have a little bit of utility. You're playing against a Chromox deck, you're playing against a deck that's trying to play Blood Moons and Chandras, so those cards are relatively expensive, but I just don't think that's what your game plan is. In this matchup, the Moon Stompy deck is the deck that's trying to act on the mana denial access, and if you try and fight them on that front, you're probably putting yourself in a losing position. Yeah,
totally agree. I find it kind of amusing that the Stompy deck actually has 3 copies of Ensnaring Bridge in the sideboard, likely for the Sneak and Show matchup, perhaps something else as well, but it's one of the best cards against it from the Red Prism side, and it's also one it exists in his sideboard.
Yeah, I think even when you're playing against Dark Depths decks, you're going to bring Ensnaring Bridge in.
Right.
And that's just to overload their artifact and enchantment removal spells. So if those decks are only playing a couple copies of a card like Nature's Claim or Crozen Grip or what have you, having uh, like many more copies of permanent based hate than they have answers is a good place to be, especially when you don't have filtering in your deck. So he's probably bringing that in against the Mirror Age decks as well. So it's pretty interesting. The Eldrazi deck is going to be on the play here for game 2. What sort of opening hand do you think that he's looking for here?
Well, he has a lot more good cards after board, right? He's burning those Ratchet Bombs. He still has all those colorless mana sources that he had in game 1. I think he's going to be looking for something early, some early pressure. The Stompy deck is not going to be able to rely on their prison elements as much after board, so they might be keeping in a wider range of 7-card hands, since he knows mulliganing aggressively is less effective. So any aggressive start from the Eldrazi side might punish the Stompy deck just enough.
Yeah, let's see what we have here. We have a hand with no red sources for the moon player, so this probably is going to get sent back.
A lot of 4-mana spells. It looks like the Eldrazi side brought in Sorcerer's Spyglass as well. A lot of good cards to hit off of that. What do you think is the highest impact threat to hit?
With Sorcerer's Spyglass, I actually think it might be specifically for Chandra in this matchup. You care about so few of the other cards that the Moon Stompy player is playing that have activated abilities. So I think it's basically earmarked for naming Chandra.
Yeah, I think that might be the only thing to name. There are 4 copies of Chandra Torch of Defiance that he knows about. Hiroyuki opting not to split up his Chandras, which makes sense because this one's just so much better than any of the other options.
Yeah, so I mean, other cards that the Spyglass could name is Hazaret the Fervent, and then Pierre and Kira Nalar, but those are a 1 copy apiece, so they're much less likely to hit the battlefield than the actual Chandra itself. So,
much less relevant.
Much less relevant, yeah.
Stompy player, or the Prison player rather, going to 5 cards. His 6-card hand, it looked kind of close to me. It was a Spirit Guide, a Chrome Mox, some two War Bosses, and a Chandra, and some I think it was a Bridge. But I think if you don't draw a Soul Land, that hand is just not effective enough, right?
Yeah, and I think he's probably correct in shipping that back. So I think you probably have to keep that on 5. It doesn't feel great, but...
Yeah, pretty low impact spell and a lot of mana sources. So not the most exciting 5-card hand, but can't really go down to 4.
Let me just lead off with a Mimic here for Taruya.
Kind of exactly what he wants, right? It's gonna probably, if it's followed up by any of the large Eldrazi, it's gonna offer a lot of pressure. But it looks like he doesn't have a Thought-Knot Seer unless there's a second Mimic coming down.
Yeah, so if he doesn't have a Thought-Knot Seer this turn, he's probably got something bigger in his hands, like a Reality Smasher next turn. Let's see what he has. Oh no, just a Spyglass and a Ratchet Bomb. So nothing great out of Taruya next turn unless he draws it off the top.
Right, but 2 Mimics is a lot of potential damage. Any Eldrazi off the top, Reality Smasher, Thought-Knot Seer, or Endless One is just going to represent a whole boatload of damage. And with Hiroyuki at 5 cards, I'm not sure how much he's going to be able to combat this.
So Spyglass is going to see a Ratchet Bomb, and that's probably what the name is going to be here. He doesn't really care about the Wastelands that Taruya has, so I don't think that's going to be the name.
Yeah, and the game's not going to come down to any Ayavugan stuff, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That Ratchet Bomb is going to... One of Hiroyuki's best draws right now is certainly Ensnaring Bridge. He's mulligan so low that he's actually going to be locked down under the bridge if he draws the next turn. So, or at least pretty close. So taking the Ratchet Bomb to be able to stop the answer is definitely going to be relevant.
Yeah, and I need to go take a look at Taruya's list, but I think that his only answer to a Spyglass on the table is actually Ratchet Bomb. So Spyglass naming Ratchet Bomb will protect all of his other permanents from Ratchet Bomb, or protect all of his Spyglasses guaranteed.
Yeah, he could Ulamog it, but the game will be effectively over at that point. And yep,
Right.
Endless One is a huge draw there. 10
Wow,
points of
okay.
damage. Puts the lethal on the table for next turn, so Hiroyuki needs a really good top deck right here. And I don't believe that was it. I think that was an Abrade, if I'm not mistaken. That could buy an extra turn, theoretically.
Yeah, hard to make out what's in his hand, but let's see.
Yep, it wasn't Abrade.
Okay. So still not a great position for Hiroyuki.
Nope. Any Eldrazi bigger than 2 power is lethal here, and even after that, Hiroyuki's going to need a good draw. Mad Reshaper is some exact 6 damage right there. I'm going to see game 3.
We're going to game 3 with finals of the GP, game 3, two decks where they're trying to make their opponent not play Magic.
Just like Richard Garfield intended.
Just like Richard Garfield intended, right?
Yeah. I mean, Blood Moon was an early design, right? It came out in the dark, so I'm sure Richard Garfield had a hand in that. I'm sure this is exactly what he envisioned.
Yeah, I think he was involved designing a lot of the early sets, but you know, now that Turi is on the draw and Hiroyuki's on the play, do you think they're going to make any changes to how they sideboarded?
I don't think so. I think that a lot of the cards that came out for both decks are very clearly bad cards in the matchup. Not very play draw dependent, so I don't think there's going to be a lot of changes going into game 3. It could affect mulligan decisions a lot. I think the prison side especially. I know he mulliganed some unplayable hands, but if there was a close 7 that you would keep on the play, perhaps mulligan on the draw, I think that's the only thing that's really going to change.
Yeah, and you know, it's a bit unfortunate that the finals of the GP is coming down to something like this, but I think when the Moon Stompy player is on the play, you know, it's all about what's in their opening hand and whether or not they have to mulligan. So if they have a turn 1 Blood Moon plus a quick clock, there's going to be very, very little counterplay from Turiya. But if his hands are a bit weaker and he has to mulligan, then I think we're going to see a game that's similar to last one where Turiya's just kind of going to run over him.
Yeah, I mean, mulliganing is a skill too. Decks like these get a lot of bad rap for maybe their monogamous play patterns, but choosing a mulligan, how to sideboard, even constructing your deck, like we talked about those small decisions in deck construction being really relevant in game 1. Like these are all skills in Magic, and although they're not necessarily going to be apparent in this one instance of a game, these 2 players made a lot of good decisions to get here to this point. So,
absolutely. So you know, for a long time, I sort of hated on shops and vintage, and you know, after I picked up the deck, I realized that there's a ton of play to the deck that's not apparent on its surface, and mulligan decisions are a huge, huge thing. And once I started practicing my mulligan decisions, my win rate went up by a lot. Oh, look at this. Looks like we have a turn 1 Moon from the Moon player.
Yeah, that is a premium hand. The Eldrazi deck is definitely going to need something good to counterplay this. You definitely just go all in on this Blood Moon on turn 1, right? You don't let them develop at all, even for a single turn.
Oh, absolutely. You put it in play. But it looks like Turiya has a Ratchet Bomb as a potential answer.
Yep. So the Stompy deck it might need to find an Abrade or a Spyglass pretty quickly, but this could come down to some good draws and what happens in the early game, because the Prison deck definitely has a good draw.
Yeah, and here we go, turn 1 Blood Moon. And I think the Moon player also has a Sorcerer Spyglass in hand, so it looks like they're already set up to stop this Ratchet Bomb too.
Well, very unfortunate that he had to get rid of this Rabble Master. I'm sure if he had any other red card in his hand, he would have exiled that instead and presented an incredibly quick clock right after this Blood Moon. But you got to do what you got to do, and if he draws any threat after this, Turiya is going to be on the back foot.
Yeah, and you know, Turiya has Grim Monolith into an Endless One, so he's gonna, I think on turn 4 he's gonna be able to make a 6/6, and if Hiroyuki sort of bricks on draws for a couple turns and is not able to put a threat in play, he's gonna he's gonna be able to get ahead on board and might be able to just kill him, even though there's a Blood Moon.
So
Interesting.
The Prison deck sandbagged a Spyglass. Why do you think that happened?
You know, I'm not sure. It's possible that he was waiting to play it to gain more information, so that way he gets to see more cards with it. But that doesn't really feel like a great line to me. Interesting.
So he just took care of the Chrome Locks. That's crazy. So he must think that he can win through this Blood Moon. He does have access to a Grim Monolith, like you said, so maybe he's just not worried at all about this Blood Moon, and he just thinks that's not the axis that he wants to fight on.
And just a 2-mana 2/2. Wow.
It's a good old Grizzly Bear.
Now, does Taria have another land in hand?
I don't believe so. He misses land drops, so...
He did.
Oh, it looks like he has another Racket Bomb, so that explains the destroying the Chrome Mox play.
Yeah, it does.
He didn't want to get a 4th drop the following turn, which makes a lot of sense, and he can deal with the Blood Moon at his leisure later on in the game.
Yeah, and Hiroyuki is still opting not to cast this Spyglass.
Perhaps trying to entice Taria into extending something into play, or maybe just waiting. Maybe wants the information in cards in hand. Maybe not necessarily information for what he wants to name, but gonna wait to a point. Wait as long as possible to play it, and then gain information on what cards Taria has in hand so he can properly plan out the rest of the game.
Yeah, and it looks like Hiroyuki might be rewarded for waiting, and the reason why is in the last couple of turns, Taria has drawn Umezawa's Jit, so it's possible that he might want to name that if this game, if there ends up being a gummed up board or Hiroyuki draws a few creatures, it's possible that Jit is more important than Ratchet Bomb. Yeah,
and even Jit just increases the clock on this board states pretty significantly, right? The Thought-Knot Seer on its own is a 5-turn clock, but if Taria were to draw a land this turn and play Jitte, I think that would make it into a 3-turn clock. So that's 2 full turns. So perhaps naming Jitte here is going to swing the matchup pretty significantly.
Yeah, and if you kill your opponent, 2 turns quicker, it's like you drew 2 cards, right?
Right, of course. Good old card advantage.
Okay, so Taria has a couple different things to name here. I think it's probably, Ratchet Bomb, Jit, and Endbringer are all reasonable things to name. In this spot, a 6-mana 6/6 is still pretty good. So maybe you don't need the additional activated abilities to make that card effective. But I'm guessing he named Jit.
Yeah, I think Taria put it off to the side slightly, so it looks like he named it. But honestly, this is now a 2-turn clock, right? He's attacked down to 14. Now 7 power in play. Hiroyuki needs to draw something. It's going to kill pretty quick, and perhaps Taria understanding that he doesn't really need to get rid of Blood Moon in order to win this matchup. Just one good Grim Monolith activation, get 1 creature into play seems to just be enough.
Yeah, I mean, Chandra would be a great draw here for Hiroyuki. Kill the Thought-Knot Seer, draw a card, get a little bit closer to drawing more creatures to stabilize the board a little bit. But it looks like he probably, if he had drawn a good card for this turn, he probably would have played it.
Yeah, it looks like he has an Abrade and a Fiery Confluence, so he could use Fiery Confluence to deal with the Endless One if he wanted to save the Abrade for later. He's a little bit more mana efficient this turn. And perhaps can nab that Grim Monolith down the line. Just get rid of his colorless mana source, and then if he draws an answer to Thought-Knot Seer, perhaps that locks him out of the game. Yeah, and it looks like that's what he opted to do, but Taria still gets to attack with the 4/4 here, and he's this game's gonna get closed out pretty quickly here. Drew a monkey for turn. Hiroyuki could be okay here. So he gets to play a Magus of the Moon here, and his leftovers are Braid and Simian Spirit Guide. And the Ratchet Bomb's going to get ticked up to 1, so not threatening to do anything yet. And if Hiroyuki draws a land, he gets to play another 2/2, threaten to trade with the Thought-Knot Seer and destroy the Ratchet Bomb. So no fear of Jitte coming down. So maybe he's okay. And if he draws a spell instead, perhaps that spell is going to be high impact enough to influence the board. So I think Hiroyuki is still in a fine spot here. Yeah. Waste would be a huge draw here for Taria. Waste plus another mana get this Reality Smasher on the table. Oh yeah, but, Waste would be insane for sure. Any land to untap this Grim Monolith would be serviceable as well. Yeah. So no 5th mana source here, so this might be a little sketchy because now he gets to get rid of the Spyglass. Although getting rid of the Spyglass is not a good play, actually, now that I think about it, because it gets rid of your Grim Monolith too. But So Hiroyuki has one more turn to upgrade this Racket Bomb.
Yeah, the Grim Monolith here was a good draw. He's going to get to untap and play something big out of his hand.
Right.
And these 3-mana 2/2s are just not going to get it done against a Reality Smasher, or I believe, did he also have an Oblivion Sower in hand?
I'm not sure. Definitely saw 2 Smashers. And I think he might have another Thought Knot.
Oh, okay. Oh, Chandra actually looks like it might be pretty good here.
Yeah, Chandra deals with the Thought Knot Seer. The Racket Bomb's going to deal with the Magus of the Moon and the Blood Moon and the Simian Spirit Guide, which is just going to completely unlock his hand, though. I'm surprised by this play. I think he needed to kill the Racket Bomb, right? This Racket Bomb is going to be very devastating.
Well, the Ratchet Bomb is, let's see, it's actually a little bit of a tough spot. So if you kill the Ratchet Bomb here, you lose your Spyglass, and it's going to kill both of the Grim Monoliths from Teruya.
No, sorry, that's not what I mean. If Hiroyuki has a Braid in his hand, and I think he should have destroyed the Ratchet Bomb with the Abrade, because now the Ratchet Bomb gets to clear up all the 3s, right?
Right, yeah, but I think sort of the counterplay to that is that now you're unlocking the Jit in Teruya's hands. So he's gonna, if he draws a land, he has the turn of play Jit, equip, and attack, which is just gonna be pretty tough to beat. So
you mean if you just popped off the Abrade right away, he would just pop the Rocket Bomb on 2 instead?
Yeah, he might. Even though it blows up his Grim Monoliths, it gives him the out of drawing a land. It's not a great line, but
and there we have it.
Yeah, and we
gets
have
rid of the
handshake.
Blood Moons, play 2 Reality Smashers, and that's game.
Jeez, and Eldrazi takes down the GP.